first off, I'm having soup.
Oh, lovely. Love a bit of soup on a freezing cold, blizzardy day. So now I've just popped to the shops, and it was all fine. I thought, actually, on the way there, I thought, yeah, it's over. It's coming to an end. And then literally went into a shop, came out, and it's a blizzard going on out there. Chaos.
Well, even though I say so myself, this is rather fine onion soup I made a few weeks ago and froze. Yeah.
Rather.
Listen, the podcast hasn't even properly started yet. And you know how, I don't know whether you heard in the trailer, it does that kind of, it goes, and then, so in that little gap, we have to say the title of the podcast really fast, together.
Let's do it.
Okay, here we go. And
the Benji and Nick show. Okay,
that's slow.
That's it.
Here we go. The Benji and Nick show.
Like that, okay.
Yeah.
The Benji and Nick show. That was like slap back delay, wasn't it? The Benji and Nick show. The chip shop.
Well, hello and welcome to the Benji and Nick show. I am not Benji.
And I am not Nick. But we are together, Benji and Nick.
And I'm having another bit of soup.
This lovely, whilst he takes a sip of his soup, I'll explain the rules, lay down the house rules this is a safe space, a little podcast, a little nook in the universe of podcasts where we discuss some of our favourite things and, well, just about anything really.
And it may not have escaped your attention, and it may not be surprising to you that our first topic is death to the Daleks.
Oh,
Shall
lovely.
I explain, just in case there's some people who don't know what death to the Daleks is?
I think so.
Death to the Daleks, which I can't say. Death to the Daleks is a 1974 Doctor Who story starring John Pertwee and Elizabeth Sladen. Elizabeth Sladen playing Sarah Jane. And they didn't really call her Sarah Jane much in those days. They really called her Sarah most of the time. Important fact, intervention. Death to the Daleks is the third serial of the 11th season of the British science fiction television series Doctor Who, which was first broadcast in 4 weekly parts from the 23rd of February to the 16th of March 1974. The narrative begins as the TARDIS suffers an energy drain and crash lands on the planet Exelon. The Doctor, John Pertwee, and his companion Sarah, Elizabeth Sladen, are subsequently embroiled in a conflict between the Daleks and the human Marine Space Corps expedition over the mineral perinium, which can cure and give immunity from a deadly space plague. It was John Pertwee's last series, his final Dalek story, and it's one of those stories that when I became when I met other Doctor Who fans, I was a Doctor Who fan since probably birth, I discovered that people hated it and regarded it as substandard nonsense.
Absolutely.
And for me, it had been the best Doctor Who story ever, because it's the first one I recorded all of the audio of, or actually episodes 2, 3 and 4, because I didn't have too much tape, and I thought episode 1 won't have the Daleks in it because I know how these things go, so I'll just record it from episode 2 onwards. And that brings us to the first point I want to make for you to discuss with me, Benji. What is because your first experience of death to the Daleks will be completely different to mine. I watched it in 1974. Tell us about your experience first.
Well, my experience was I grew up in a time...
soup.
So it's a decoy. My first experience of death to the Daleks was actually I grew up. I was born in the 90s, and I grew up at a time where Doctor Who wasn't on the television. Well, you know, it was repeated and whatnot.
It was on the toaster.
It was in the fridge. And so my first experience of Death to the Daleks was that I went to Blockbuster Video, which is a now defunct video rental store. Or for those of you who don't even know what a video rental store in this digital age is, that was a place where you go and rent out VHS tapes, take them home and watch them. And there was a very small... this is actually very close to my first experience with Doctor Who. There's a very small Doctor Who section in Blockbuster where they had, I think, 3 or 4 different Doctor Who videos. They had... it was mostly, actually... John Pertwee related. They had Planet of the Spiders, Death to the Daleks, Genesis of the Daleks and the Sontaran Experiment, which was like a double whammy there. And I think they also had Pyramids of Mars in there. And so my first memory was, I think it was the first one I picked up, was Death to the Daleks, and it was the VHS with the yellow, had a yellow band, I think, around that said Death to the Daleks.
I remember that,
logo, and the picture of the Dalek on fire, and that was my first experience watching Doctor Who and the Daleks. I watched the Dalek movies. Of course, beforehand they would,
which we'll be discussing in a later podcast.
Oh, definitely. But this was my first taste of Doctor Who, really, I suppose. And it was what started my sort of the love affair that I have with the show, and the show, which is not only being a hobby of mine.
Finished the soup, by the way.
Was it nice?
Crikey, it was.
Crikey, So yeah, Death to the Daleks, I think holds. I think for both of us, I think it's a very firm place in our hearts, and the right place to start this series of podcasteries.
Well, I was in comprehensive school when I watched it, and I seem to remember it was a time when a series had started broadcasting on ITV. The other side, sorry, Scott Hancock's texting me. He wants to talk to me about some scripts. He'll just have to wait because Death to the Daleks is more important than all of that. A series on ITV, and ITV were always trying to find something that would break the deadlock. That the BBC in those days had command of the Saturday night schedule, and they would hit the audience straight after the sports programme Grandstand with a kids thing like Basil Brush or something, and then there would be Doctor Who and the Generation Game, and these things were firm family favourites. And for years the BBC had Saturday night sewn up, so the ITV were always on the lookout for something that would break it. And in 1974 they were trying it with Kung Fu.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, have you ever heard of that series?
Kung Fu?
Yeah, it was massively popular.
I don't know. I can't say I've ever heard of Kung Fu.
And the different ITV regions got it at different times, because I remember my cousin, who was from the sort of Liverpool area, telling me all about this series, and we had never had it down in the southern television area. It starred David Carradine. He was a sort of Kung Fu expert from the Orient, and I don't think he is of that ethnicity. I may be wrong. So it's the kind of thing that could never be shown again.
Classic 1970s casting there.
Yeah, sort of borderline racism. I don't know.
Definitely 1970s.
And there was and Little and Large got a lot of Little and Large, a terrible comedy duo.
Yeah,
they got a lot of mileage out of it because he used his nickname, and all the flashbacks to his mentor was Grasshopper, and they used to sort of and it was a bald man with sort of that white eyes, signifying he was blind.
Very, very classic.
And he used to call him Glasshopper, in that sort of cod accent, and so they did a lot of, casually racist jokes on that.
Gosh.
But Kung Fu was tremendously successful, and so ITV put it on opposite Doctor Who. And whether it succeeded or not, I'm fairly dubious about that. I suppose we should Google Kung Fu, shouldn't we, just to make sure I've got all the details right.
Kung Fu ITV.
I did warn people we would use Google.
I can't. Yeah, well, Google's.
This is off the cuff stuff. You see, I've just written the wrong word. Kung Fu. And now you see, that's interesting. I'll have to write Kung Fu TV series, won't I?
I typed in Kung Fu independent television, and it came up with David Carradine, the actor who found fame in 1970s television series Kung Fu and later in Kill Bill.
The series follows the adventures of Kwai Chang Caine, portrayed by David Carradine as an adult, Keith Carradine as a teenager, and Radamese Pera as a young boy. A Shaolin monk who travels through the American Old West, armed only with his spiritual training and his skill in martial arts, as he seeks Danny Caine, his half-brother. Many of the aphorisms used in the series are adapted or derived directly from Tao Te Ching, a book of ancient Taoist philosophy, attributed to the sage Lao Tzu. There you are.
It's interesting. That's. Can you even get it these days? I mean, it looks. It's. I didn't realize it. Yeah, it's American. Warner Brothers own it. So.
Yeah. So it was a very high budget show, but it had lots of mystical, strange things, and inevitably, he would be mocked for who he was because he didn't look American and all this kind of thing, and they would hard nuts would come and say, hey, what's the matter with you, and he would eventually use kung fu against them when they attacked him, and everybody was kung fu fighting. That's when that I think that record came out around about then because of that. I think I'm right in saying.
How strange. Cool.
The reason I'm telling you all this boring stuff is that in our household, my father loved westerns, and he and I would watch westerns together, and Kung Fu was a kind of western series. It had people with 6-shooters and Stetson hats and what have you, and deserts and horses and all the cliches, and so this was for him. But Doctor Who arrived for that season, scheduled against it.
Oh man.
And there were no domestic video recorders in those days. And so our only solution was we bought a portable... we still just had black and white television in our household in those days. We didn't get a colour television until about 1978. And it was The Deadly Assassin was the first story I saw in colour at home.
Oh, good one to start, though.
And so we bought this... portable television, which I had upstairs, and for me to watch Doctor Who while Dad was watching Kung Fu. But the thing was, we couldn't get a proper aerial signal on the portable, and so I was watching Doctor Who in a sort of slightly inferior quality picture, which was driving me absolutely mad. But luckily, by the time we got to Death to the Daleks in that series, my dad had kind of just gone off Kung Fu, or couldn't bear me whining on about it, and just sort of whatever, just gave in to me. So I was able to watch Death to the Daleks downstairs and put my microphone next to it and record episodes 2, 3 and 4.
How amazing.
Yeah.
It must have been brilliant to watch it on TX, to see it, as it happened.
Well, of course, at the time, you don't think it's particularly... Well, I thought it was brilliant because I loved it, but you know what I mean? It never occurred to you that Doctor Who would be any other thing.
Yeah.
Doctor Who was a thing you saw once and could never see again. So it did feel extremely special. I mean, I would get sick with excitement before an episode of Doctor Who. The trembling in my tummy, and the Daleks and everything, and just amazing. And I and guarding that microphone and stopping people from nudging it or making a noise during the recording. I mean, my brother's girlfriend at the time made a noise just as the Daleks came round the corner.
Oh no!
And were about to be electrocuted, in the city.
Great sequence, that one.
Yeah, well, every time I think of that, I can hear the music reaching a crescendo, and I can hear this woman, I think her name was Hetty, going, and they're going to get me, I can hear it. Be quiet! Yeah. Also, something I've mentioned in the Big Finish podcast a long time ago, is that I eventually got a recording of episode 1 of Death to the Daleks from my old friend Nicholas Layton, who I was at school with, who, as I thought, was the only other Doctor Who fan in the world. He had a recording of episode 1 that he had done on a cassette tape. I was recording on reel-to-reel 1/4-inch.
Awesome.
And just before Death to the Daleks starts, the BBC announcer says, and now on BBC One, Doctor Who in a brand new adventure, Death to the Daleks. His grandmother manages, between him saying that and the theme tune starting, to say the word rubbish.
Oh, no.
So, Death to the Daleks. Rubbish. And many Doctor Who fans would agree with that.
Absolutely, it's the horrible tag that this story has seemed to get over the years, and I like to think
what is it?
To think we're doing our little bits to fight that, because
fight it, Bilal,
fight it. I think there's so many elements of this story which are brilliant, and there are so many elements of this story which people slate for reasons I don't know. So,
what is it that people don't like about Death to the Daleks?
So, I think the first thing and the main thing that seems to be trademarked as terrible is the music, which is done by Carrie Blyton, who is related to the fabulous writer Enid Blyton.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, they're related. He's related to Enid Blyton, no less.
In what way?
Let me find it.
It was amazing music. He used, was it a saxophone quartet or something?
He did indeed, yes.
And then they put that through a ring modulator, which is the thing that does the Dalek voice effect. So it gives it a sort of Dalek-y, warbly effect.
It's a very clever, the thing about Carrie Blyton, love him or hate him, he actually takes a lot of time in his music, in all of his music, especially the Doctor Who stuff, takes time to actually look at the concepts and say, and thinks about it in a way, it's not, I'll just do any old thing. For example, so you raised that he's used the saxophone quartet and he's put some modulation through it to give it that Dalek feel. Now, I think, A, that's fantastic. B, the saxophones are great because what it does is you're in a back to basics world where this is, I assume if you're listening to this, you would have seen the story. One of the main things about it is that there was a power cut and that's the whole planet. There was no power. So, of course, by having this very old back to basics stripped down saxophones and a few drums and bits and bobs, I think kind of conjures up that image of it's not all electronic, and there are bits of electronic stuff, but that's only actually established when there are things of power. So if you look, when the Dalek ship lands, you can hear the wom, wom, and that's before, and also later on you get some of the high pitched stuff when I think you get contrasts in the Exelon city, and a little bit of it when the Daleks arrive to take on the priest. But I look at that as like a contrast between archaic technology of sticks.
Yeah, I think he really thought through it, didn't he?
Definitely,
and great themes. Da, 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 da. I remember that one for the Daleks, and da, 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 for the city.
Oh, I love it.
As I've mentioned before in Big Finish podcast, that tune there was the first thing I learned to play on a little penny whistle. Just by ear, working out the tune. Everyone else is playing London's Burning, and I'm playing that. Yeah.
But that's what it is. That's you summed up, I think. Here we go. Enid Blyton here is his auntie, Enid Mary Blyton.
Wow.
His mother was Hanley Harrison Blyton. Oh no, sorry. His mother was Florence Maud Pullen. Father was Hanley Harrison Blyton. And then Carrie was the son. So there we go.
Wow.
A direct link there.
And Mark Ayres, who later ended up doing music for Doctor Who and is a friend of mine, he was taught when he did his degree in music. Carrie Blyton was one of his lecturers, or came in and did a lecture. I don't know whether, but anyway, he was taught by him.
Oh, wow.
And he had all these crazy ideas about making music in interesting ways, like throwing ping pong balls at the strings of a piano and stuff like that, So he had really interesting off the wall ideas. And I think it was Michael E. Bryant, the director, who used him.
Yes, I think. I'll double check that because I know that he did this.
Some of the directors kind of took issue with Dudley Simpson's music, didn't they? Because he did virtually all the music for John Pertwee's time. And so I think some directors came in and they just wanted their stories to sound different.
Interestingly enough, Michael E. Bryant actually isn't exclusive to Carrie Bryant, to Carrie Blyton, because he was in the Silurians as well.
Yes.
He was directed by, I'm going to double check this so I don't get it wrong, Timothy
Coombe.
Yeah.
Tim Coombe.
Tim Coombe.
Yes, which John Pertwee used as a voice exercise, apparently. Yeah.
Timothy Coombe. Tim Coombe. So, Carrie Blyton, people didn't dig what he did, and I can understand it because it's not what you expect from Doctor Who. I totally agree with that.
Michael Bryant used him again in Revenge of the Cybermen.
Which, again, is, strangely enough, one of your favourites as well, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Well, that's a weird little link there.
And that's hated by fans as well.
See, I think that the music doesn't work so well in that story. It doesn't work as effectively as it does in the previous two. But I enjoy it.
I really like it. I mean, interestingly, that music is added to. Philip Hinchcliffe hated it so much that he got Peter Howell to add some electronic elements to it. So actually, Revenge of the Cybermen is Peter Howell, who later did loads of radiophonic workshop music for Doctor Who. It's his first uncredited musical contribution to Doctor Who.
That is very interesting.
You know, with the bits when they cut to Voga at one point in Revenge of the Cybermen and the music goes
yeah.
I mean, that is not Carrie Blyton. That's
classic.
That is an early synthesizer from the radiophonic workshop. And he also augments some of the other cues with little... I mean, and I know that Philip Hinchcliffe had cues that Carrie Blyton had written for Revenge of the Cybermen cut because he just didn't like them. He found them too whimsical. He wanted something more hard-hitting. Apparently, when the TARDIS materialises at the end and the Doctor, Sarah and Harry head off into the TARDIS, there's a little waltz.
And they what?
And Philip Hinchcliffe had that cut. You see, Michael Bryant obviously wanted Carrie Blyton back, but yeah, that wasn't... Philip Hinchcliffe hadn't quite asserted his authority over Doctor Who at that point, because that was his first producing job, and he had Barry Letts as his sort of executive producer leaning over his shoulder. So I'm sure he had a lot of things to think about. And
I suppose it sort of lends itself to the subjective nature of Doctor Who, because I think Doctor Who is an incredibly... everything's subjective, but Doctor Who, there's so many different times in the show's history where things are a certain way, music changes, actors change, concepts change, and so you look at the music, it's a very personal thing. Everybody has stories that they love the music and they can hum the music to, and there are some you can't even remember the music to.
No, that's true.
I think it's just different for everybody, but for some reason Carrie got a lot of flack in people's opinion. People didn't take to his music really.
Also, a lot of people, I redid the voices for Day of the Daleks for a BBC DVD release. A lot of people wanted me to redo the voices of Death to the Daleks because they didn't like what Michael Wisher did for that, and I said I won't do that. I don't think I stopped it from happening, but I just said I don't think there's anything wrong with the Dalek voices. They are a bit different. I think the modulation's a bit light on it, but Michael had such a wonderful sort of... he had a real grit in his voice. I knew Michael quite well, actually. He came in when we did those old Doctor Who plays back in the day, audio visuals. He came in and did our first Dalek one and did the Dalek voices for us. And he did it without a ring modulator, and we put an effect on later. But he just stood there in front of the mic doing all the different, you will obey, and all this kind of stuff. Oh. He was just fantastic, and a lovely guy, full of anecdotes and delighted to help us. And it's as I may have said many times before, it's one of my deepest regrets that he didn't live long enough to be involved with Big Finish, because he absolutely would have been there. Worked with him with Keith Barnfather and Real Time Pictures on stuff for him there. He did Downtime, and no, he didn't do Downtime. Did you do? No, he did Wartime anyway. The first one, the one with Sergeant Benton in. Yeah, lovely guy. I mean, of a certain, I would say, I'm pretty certain he probably would have voted Brexit. And also, someone told me once that they were working with him in theatre when the Falklands War broke out, and they said it was virtually all they could do to stop Michael grabbing a Sten gun and heading over there himself. Say no more. Interesting. So he and I didn't have much in common politically, but he was a lovely guy, so generous and great company. So
I think you can say from that, though, you can say that he's very firmly he started what would become Big Finish, and the way he was very much involved in those early days. And so he has got, in the way he has his involvement from that has lived on has been realised into the Big
and
Finish.
You could say the same also about Peter Miles, who sadly died very recently.
Oh, so sad. Yeah.
he was involved in the audio visuals. He actually did a project that Gary Russell got him in on, a story called Geopath. And for years, Gary and I, whenever we mentioned Peter Mars, we'd say, "Update me, Magog," because that was his first line in it. And there was this sort of computer called Magog, which he had this strange relationship with, and was always, "Magog, what is happening?" You can just hear him doing it, can't you? An amazing actor. Anyway, back to Death of the Daleks. One of the things I think about it, this is actually a really serious podcast. There's no banter. There's no "I want my money back." There's no comedy.
What are you've just gone on about Death of the Daleks like two fans that you are.
I think it could be a movie. It's got a movie story structure. It would make a great movie, Death of the Daleks. And all the settings, you imagine that done with lavish budgets. I mean, it looks pretty good, most of it anyway, but, it'd be fantastic if that city wasn't made of polystyrene, wouldn't it?
Well, I would say, I think that I love the city design now. I think it's gorgeous. I think the whole story, actually, is it looks fab, and I think it's one of the better looking Doctor Who stories.
And it's nice that they painted those Daleks silver.
Yeah. Do you know, I always thought...
Spoken like a true anorak. I particularly like the silver Daleks.
I always thought they were slightly sandy coloured, like a silvery sort of, but of course it's just the reflection of the quarry on the silver.
It is.
For years I thought that. I really did. But
and then Benji learnt about the reflective quality of light.
Sums me up, doesn't it? What is this reflection you speak of?
When you described the plot earlier and you said, "Oh, by the way, if you don't know about the plot, there's a power cut," it suddenly made me realise that, of course, in the early 70s, because of industrial action of the miners, the supplies of coal in Britain were depleted, and so our power stations had to keep cutting the power to retain enough power, for essential things. And so we experienced in the 70s a lot of power cuts, and they'd already happened earlier in the decade, but we were getting, I think, a second round of them in 1974. So I wonder whether Terry Nation had been inspired by, in that way that writers do. What can I write? Looks out of the window, as it were, on the real world. Oh, there'd been power cuts. I'll do a story about a planet where there's a permanent power cut.
3 hours on, 3 off, wasn't it? Or was it 2 on, 2 off, or something like that?
That's right. And that's why, and that's another reason why we had the portable television. And during the power cut periods, we used to have the portable television running off a car battery. So if the power went down, I could quickly dash upstairs and watch Doctor Who. It never happened, though. I never got a power cut during Doctor Who. I know lots of fans tell stories of how they did, but we always managed to escape it. But yes, it quite often...
To maintain that.
So also, it was a very strange time. I think it may have been 1974 or was it 75? But one of those years, we had 2 general elections in the same year.
Really?
Yeah, because the party couldn't get enough of a majority, so they called another election to, so...
It's a turbulent time.
A lot of political turmoil there, and a whole thing about the country actually on the verge of running out of money.
Yeah.
And so much social and industrial unrest. And so against this... comes and of course you had Monster of Peladon, which was all about miners striking, industrial action. Doctor Who was really reflecting the reality of the time in a sci-fi slightly,
in a sci-fi way, but that's
tangential way.
They always say that's the best thing. Things you look at pieces in years to come and think, I can see now that's so relevant to its time, and you can look back on it and see it for what it is. And this is a story echoing a lot of different things. Well,
and Monster of Peladon, of course, all the miners had really stupid haircuts, which may have been a comment on Arthur Scargill, who was renowned for his stupid haircut or lack thereof. Coma Cross number. I wonder whether they thought about that. It would have been funny if they'd all had Arthur Scargill haircuts in Monster of Peladon.
That is a story I've not watched in a long time, actually, because I always tend to go for the Curse of Peladon and then just don't watch the Monster. I don't know why.
Yeah, Monster's good. I mean, the Ice Warriors are being nasty in it, which is quite refreshing. I remember as a young fan, I found Curse of Peladon very frustrating because it turned out that the Ice Warriors were good guys. And I just thought, what? Oh, shut up. But of course, it's an excellent story. But yeah, very...
I love that little creature in the the weird life support unit. With the voice, that's really good. That was amazing. Love that
Arcturus.
Oh,
I love the way that people were just named after their planets. Why wasn't the Earth delegate called Earth?
Earth, come here.
Arcturus from Arcturus. Alpha Centauri from Alpha Centauri. Brilliant.
Lazy.
The Ice Warrior should have been called Mars. This is Mars, and this is my assistant Phobos. He sort of orbits me.
Hey, I like it.
I'll bet you're glad that's all over. That was a joke in a BBC One children's Saturday morning show called Outer Space, and he used to have a theme tune that went dun 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 dun, and I have taken leave of my senses. And in that, and they would have all sorts. It was like an anthology thing with lots of other programs within it.
Oh, I remember those.
But the continuity announcer for Outer Space was a computer, and every now and again he would do an Outer Space version of a knock knock joke. Knock knock, who's there? Blah, blah, blah. And the computer used to, instead of knock knock, it was called a bleep bleep joke, because that was like sci-fi. To go bleep bleep, who's in that space?
Oh, wicked!
Rather than and one of them was orbit, orbit who? Orbit. You're glad that's all over.
Classic.
So there you have it.
Classic.
That got very tangential,
but worth it.
Yeah. Death to the Daleks. Is there anything else you want to say about Death to the Daleks before we go?
Absolutely. I think Death to the Daleks, let's talk about the Exelons, and rather...
Oh, right, you're going a whole new chapter now, are you? I was trying to finish the podcast.
Oh, I thought you said anything else. I just thought we'd touch on Bilal quickly.
Oh, of course. Yes.
We have to touch on Bilal.
And who played it? Arnold...
Yarrow. Arnold Yarrow, who was absolutely fabulous as Bilal, who is the friendly Exelon who meets
He's
Sarah.
97 years old.
Good on him.
He was in a movie called Marla. Wow, he's born in... known for his work on EastEnders. He was in EastEnders. Really? Doctor Who in 1963. What was he in Doctor Who in 1963? And Warship. And I remember Warship. It was a series set aboard a British warship, funnily enough. What was he doing in Doctor Who 1963? Maybe they're just saying that's when Doctor Who...
Maybe. Has it got his actor 44 credits? He was in London's Burning Shopkeeper. I never knew that.
You see, you love that, don't you?
Love that show.
You love that, don't you? Yeah.
I love it, I do. Bilal, 74, Armchair Theatre, Coronation Street as a surveyor. Tram conductor in Storybox. Ghost Squad.
Ghost Squad is a sort of spy series from the 50s.
Very well, there he goes.
I've actually got the box set, and he's not a working actor anymore. He's not in the Spotlight directory. He was interviewed for the Death to the Daleks DVD.
He was really good on that.
He was,
talking about the way he approached the role, and
how kind John Pertwee was to him, guiding him around. He's probably just said, "Get out of the way, get out of it." This man in a stupid mask.
But I will always maintain the thing. I mean, it's one of those things. I always think that Bilal would have made a great companion to the Doctor.
Well, that's what they asked me about on that documentary. I said it would have been very frustrating for him. He said, "Yes, it's me. I'm the one in the TARDIS." Like, "No, you're not. You're just some old bloke, you know." "No, I'm in Doctor Who. I really am."
It is I. But I like him because I liked him because he was sort of... He was incredibly nice, obviously, but he got the job done, and he knew. You know, I think what you get here, you see this really nice thing of he knows that he has to do what he has to do, but he doesn't want to do it. And the
you mean the character?
The character,
I thought you were talking about Arnold. Yeah, I thought, how do you know so much about Arnold?
What he knows.
I know that guy. He took no nonsense. No, he slapped them right down.
I can see inside his head, you know. He was looking there and he said, "Nah, those Exelons, mate."
All that bush baby research he did. He went and researched with bush babies, didn't he?
He did indeed, with the eyes and the way he moved his head.
Yeah, he's a great character. He's a great Terry Nation character, isn't he? He's the noble alien
He really is. I think he's Bilal. He deserved another chance. Although that said, I don't think he would have wanted it. I can imagine after the events of Death to Daleks, he probably went, "Oh, thank God that's over. I just want to sit down now, really."
Yes. If I come in this TARDIS with you, what will happen? Well, we'll be shot at by aliens and have to run away a lot, and the whole planets will be destroyed. I think I'll stay here, thank you, Doctor. It's very sad, isn't it, when the Dalek turns up right at the end before the Daleks say, we're going to go now with the perineum and blow the planet up, by the way. And the Dalek turns up and Bilal just cringes, and I think the Doctor sort of puts his arm around him.
Oh, I love it, yes.
Quite touched by that. I'm feeling quite emotional all of a sudden.
It's one of those stories.
Nick Briggs cried about Death to the Daleks. I think a lot of fans cried about it, but not in the way I am.
Not in that way. But it's one of those stories, I think, is a very fitting way to start off this series of new podcast adventures, because it's a story that we both hold very close to our hearts. And
so, if you want to write into this podcast, keep all your Big Finish comments for podcast@bigfinish.com, and they'll go to the Big Finish podcast, which Benji and I recorded earlier, and ask us there for podcast@bigfinish.com. But for anything to do with topics you'd like us to discuss in the Benji and Nick show, podcast@nicholasbriggs.com. Yeah,
there we go. And send in whatever you like. We don't just keep this Doctor Who. We're keeping it. We're going with everything. Whether it's television shows, whether it's pop records, great, weather instance in 1982, or the how to spell the word hapax gonomenon. It's completely.
Well, that's H. Oh, sorry. It was a rhetorical question. I realise now. Yeah. Next week we talk about the fantastic television series Catweasel.
Oh yes. Oh yes, bird of night, hoot not. Yes. You see, these are when we do the Big Finish podcast, we often talk about Catweasel. It's been one of those things that's sort of grown. The obsession has grown, and with it a love really for that series. And so, what better way than to touch on that than to do a podcast about it?
Yes.
Oh yes. Oh yes.
Yes, and here's an example of an email sent into podcast@nicholasbriggs.com, which is all about a Big Finish thing. But I'll read it out just to be nice, from James Lovell, who says, "Hey guys, am I your first emailer for Nick and Benji show?" Well, it's the Benji and Nick show for a start. I'm just going to read out an email just to have a go at someone. Oh, sorry, James. He said, "I was wondering if there's any exciting Doctor Who Torchwood projects coming soon that you could tease, especially as it's the 20th anniversary of Doctor Who at Big Finish next year. I assume you will do something for that." Well, we will at Big Finish, but this is not a Big Finish podcast. Out of curiosity, how long is the process of making a story from idea to script to CD release? It's a year. I can tell you that straight off. And thanks, and have fun with the podcast. All the best. So, James, you've emailed the wrong podcast. However, my good friend Kevin Parker, who works for NASA and has brilliantly sent us an email from NASA. He says, "Hi, Nick and Benji. So even though I'm sending to podcast@nicholasbriggs.com, I have to make the subject podcast, just so it's perfectly clear." Okay, then. He's taking the mickey out of me for saying, please make the subject line podcast. Anyhow, looking forward to the new podcast, even though I'm unbelievably behind. We're talking September on the old ones, working hard on catching up this month. Goodness me, imagine having to binge on us talking nonsense. I will say, as I said on Nick's Facebook page, that if the first podcast isn't a discussion of building construction terms, I'm going to be disappointed. Quickly, throw a few in for Kevin.
Okay, let's go straight away then. Grouting. I like grouting.
We mentioned grouting earlier, didn't you? Yeah,
I did. Yeah, I love a good old grout, whatever that means. Let's get on that great website, Construction Terms, because that website was just the home building manual. That was it. It's such fun.
Well, Kevin, by the way, while you're looking that up, Kevin says, "I dare say I will listen regardless." All the best, Kevin. Written directly from NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center in Greenbelt, Maryland. Though not in my spacesuit, because it's too hard to type while wearing it. He says
those fingers. Well, if you want to make sure a few things, at NASA you probably know these, but you want to make sure you've got your exposed aggregate finish. On top of that, it needs foundation waterproofing so that the frame inspection works perfectly with the hurricane clip. Because otherwise, you might find that your heating load has an incandescent lamp, which
that's great.
Which ultimately leads to rigid insulation boarding.
Oh God!
Which might affect your interior finish.
Oh, it does. That's a bit like Big Finish. Interior finish. It's a more thoughtful production, more intellectual.
This week on the Interior Finish podcast, we discuss mauve wallpaper. Is it in this year? Is it not? Does it work with a biscuit-coloured carpet? Who knows?
Biscuit-coloured. Biscuit
That's my carpet's biscuit.
Is it?
That's what. Yeah,
biscuit.
Yeah,
that always makes me feel like someone's trodden a biscuit into the carpet.
Oh, that's exactly what it is. There's a few custard
That's
creams.
how we do it.
That's how we do it. In that corner is a bourbon. No, I went for a nice biscuit-coloured carpet with a jasmine white wall.
Well, it looks very nice. I just don't care for the biscuit word being in a description of a carpet. Kevin does also mention that when reading out where he's emailed from, he says the natives pronounce Maryland. He's written Murrlan. Merlin. Though if you want to do the standard British version, Maryland. I, for one, won't object.
Like Maryland cookies.
Yes, well,
you can get some Asda.
Merlin. And from my
cookies.
official NASA email account, he says, because when I sent it from my personal one, it got bounced back as spam. Wow. Kevin W. Parker.
That was the universe telling you, send it from your cool email address. Send it from the cool NASA one.
Yeah. Why wouldn't you? If you had a NASA email address, you'd send from there, wouldn't you?
Funnily enough, I'm actually I'm having lunch with on Monday with my good friend Tony Mears, who was the guitarist of my band when I was young. But he works for, I think it's the UK Space Agency.
Oh, does he?
I think that's what he works.
Is his name really Dan Dare?
He is indeed. He is Dan Dare. And
Dan Dare.
So he works for UK Space Agency, so there's a little link there. It's all gone a bit spacey this week. I love their logo. God, UK Space Agency really throwing it out there with some design. Yeah, it's like a Union Jack with a little arrow. It's real Blake 7 going on there.
I just want to say, for the record, that I did try to stop this podcast at about half an hour.
You did?
But it's now 52 minutes. Oh, my television's just turned itself on.
That's
I'd paused live television and clearly it's just given up now. I think that's about it, isn't it?
It's time to sign off.
More than any normal person can bear.
Why not, though? It's the first one.
And we completely forgot to be speaking like this.
Never mind, though, because the good thing is with anything is, you just call it an anniversary issue and just make it 3 times as long. That's what we've done. It's our first anniversary. We've just started our 0 anniversary, our Zaniversary.
And just to warn you that Benji and I on this Sunday will be filming a special starting sequence for this podcast in central London. So if you hear of 2 people being arrested for prancing around in Trafalgar Square, you'll know who it is. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, we'll be bringing you more in the future. So from me, Benji, it's a goodbye.
And from me, Nick, it's also a goodbye.
Goodbye.
Pressing stop.